Sekeres and Price from Wall Center. In today's Bodog poll question, who is more underrated by the national media? Quinn Hughes or Elias Pettersson? You can vote at Sekeres and Price on Twitter. Bodog, your source of free casino games, poker strategies, and sports odds. And I love these NFL draft props they have there. First offensive lineman selected, Northwestern's Peter Skoronski. He's got the versatility to play guard and tackle. He had a teammate go high in the draft a couple of years ago, Rashawn Slater. NFL scouts like going back to the same school for the same position. So Skoronski to be the first O-line selected pays plus 150 on your Bodog line of the day.
Matt, this is really awkward, but we have national media on line one.
No, I know.
Heard the poll question.
I know.
I did.
I know.
He's terribly insulted by it all.
Who do you think you underrate more, Darren Dreger? Elias Pettersson or Quinn Hughes?
You know what? Elias Pettersson for me. I honestly, I don't think. And when I say national media, I guess I'm generalizing, overgeneralizing, but it just feels like he is the star that he was when he broke into the National Hockey League, and then some. He's regained the swagger. His confidence is high. He's grown physically, so that makes him that much stronger. His ability to control the puck, all of those things. I just don't think as national media or international media, we're giving this guy enough credit. I mean, we always seem to put, the talented offensive defensemen on a pedestal with good reason, because they're next to impossible to find. And when you draft one, you better hold on to them. But so I give a hat tip to Quinn Hughes, of course, but Elias Pettersson is under the radar.
The Hart Trophy race, if Connor McDavid didn't exist, would be really interesting. Because I'd like to say that Pettersson is a candidate there, but what about Tage Thompson? What he's doing in Buffalo? There's a lot of MVPs, but of course there's one that's 30 points clear of everybody else. So that's
right. Yeah. I mean, I don't have the betting line in front of me, but the last time I checked was maybe a week ago, and he was like, it was like minus 2,000 with Connor McDavid to win the Hart.
Yeah.
But there's so many great storylines around the National Hockey League. I mean, you look in Edmonton, you see what Leon Draisaitl is doing. You look at some of the other Canadian markets. You mentioned Blake Tage Thompson. What a story this kid is. You talk about guys and developing careers flying under the radar. I mean, I guess it's because he's in Buffalo, but that Buffalo team is going to be a very, very good team. We thought last year was a fluke. We thought the contract of $50 million was excessive for what Tage Thompson had done to that point. And then you see what he's doing this year again. So I agree with you. I mean, if you were able to eliminate Connor McDavid, then you open up the door to all kinds of intriguing stories. Mitch Marner's having a good year for the Toronto Maple Leafs. I mean, go down the list. There's a handful of players.
Down to minus 4,000 now, Dregs.
There you go.
So $4,000 to win $100 on Connor McDavid. Linus Ullmark, second choice, 25 to 1. David Pastrnak, Jock Hughes, 35 to 1. Mikko Rantanen, 60 to 1. Your next choice there. And then you get into the Robertsons, Kucherovs, McKinnons, and Kaprizovs. We'll put you down for Elias Pettersson. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
And look, what we've always said here is they are underrated, but you got to have Stanley Cup playoff success, really, to be a national name. So they've got to get to the Stanley Cup playoffs, and they got to do something when they get there. And, of course, we know that's not going to be. We know that's not going to be this year, but they'll hope to do it next year, Darren. A fascinating deadline for the Vancouver Canucks. Tell us everything you know about the Pittsburgh and JT Miller dalliance.
Well, it was something for sure. When I did Toronto radio Friday morning on First Up, I did not expect that there was going to be as much buzz over a comment that I made about the interest, which we had discussed in connecting the Pittsburgh Penguins on this show prior to trade deadline. Where I suggested that there were picks that were being lobbed by the Penguins. Now, look, here's where you get into that game of semantics too, right? Was there 100% a firm offer on the table? Some have speculated 2 first-round picks. I've heard that. I haven't verified that. But, was it a firm offer where the Canucks had to say, no, we're not interested, and here's why, because we need a center back? I don't think that was the case. Was there multiple conversations on this? Yes. Did they revisit the idea of a trade on Thursday and then again on Friday? I believe they did, to a point where our sources and others now, because others are reporting on this too, right? The Vancouver Canucks were involved in, some of the brokering. If they could find a way to get a Pittsburgh player moved from the Penguins roster to a third team, then that would free things up for the Pittsburgh Penguins to take a legitimate run at JT Miller. How they were going to fulfill the need for a centerman in Vancouver, maybe that was part of the package with the Penguins. I don't know. Was there another team that was involved in that process? Potentially. But there was a fair bit of time invested in the connection between the Vancouver Canucks and the Penguins. This I know.
What I love about having Darren Dreger on, Blake, he drops you little Easter eggs. You may remember a week ago or a couple weeks ago, he said, we don't see the three-way hockey trade much anymore. Huh? And looky. It sounds like there may have been three-way pure hockey trade.
Do you think Granlund was involved in that potential three-way? Was he part of that?
That wasn't the name I heard, and I'm loath to throw names out there on deals that didn't happen because it gets unfair to the family. Even though we're in a social media world where who cares? Yeah. I mean, that's the way it is. It wasn't any of the big boys from Pittsburgh, but it was a veteran player that my sense was potentially being shopped to at least two different teams who said, yeah, we have some interest, but it didn't get the traction that either Pittsburgh or Vancouver needed.
And presumably not a center, because that would have fit Vancouver's bill, or at least not the center that Vancouver was looking for. Right.
Yeah.
Our buddy Rick Dollywall reported Carolina was one of the teams involved on Miller, or at least broke off a call to the Canucks on Miller Friday. What do you know there?
I believe that's true. I believe that's accurate. I mean, we were hearing some of those rumblings on Friday as well. And I believe that there was another Western Conference team that potentially could have been involved that the Vancouver Canucks reached out to see if they had any interest. But, I think Rick's reporting on that was 100% on point. I believe Carolina was in the mix. How deep, how interested the Canes were, I'm not sure of that.
Is this a reopenable file, do you think? I mean, it's not like Granlund scratches the same itch as JT Miller. Do you think this could be doubled back on in the summer, or do you think that maybe Ron Hextall and Patrick Allvin don't want to talk to each other for a little bit?
Well, was there some hard feelings? Maybe. What we know is, and this is just me historically going through this dance, a number of times over the past 2.5 decades. General managers don't like their business out there unless they have a reason to want their business out there. So I can't imagine that Patrick Allvin and the Vancouver Canucks, they're fine with the reporting. They respect the jobs that we all have to do. But I'm sure that there was some questions as to, well, why is this information out there? How did this information get to the media? I mean, that's what we do. We're never going to disclose our sources. What I would wonder about here, though, fellas, I think there's a lot more pressure on Ron Hextall and the Pittsburgh Penguins than most people can understand or appreciate. That Fenway group, the new ownership of the Penguins, they're a very invested ownership group. And so, even though it looks like it's a valiant effort here by the Pittsburgh Penguins, I mean, they're in a wild card spot, but they've got Florida knocking, the Ottawa Senators, Buffalo Sabres, 5 points back. There's still some hockey left here. If the Penguins were to fail to qualify for the playoffs or to go out quickly in round one, there are some who wonder if Ron Hextall would be back as general manager. So it's a story that obviously we're going to have to continue to monitor. But that's fine. I mean, so, maybe the new owners do something drastic. That's not going to improve the roster. It isn't. And I know from the amount of leads that we were pursuing related to Hextall and the Penguins, he was trying. He was trying to give that group more than what they have in this final push here.
And just to clarify, and I think you said this last week, but just to clarify, all this interest was Miller, right? It had nothing to do with Brock Besser, really.
That's my understanding. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean the dialogue mostly, and out of respect to Brock, this is everything to do with the cap. There were a few general managers anyway who look at Brock Besser They can see that he can still put the puck in the net. Yeah, there's some concerns with skating and all of that. But, we talked about this. If he's a $4 million value, or the Canucks could get that down to a $4 million value by retaining or taking on bad deals, he probably would have been traded.
Well, and just to further your point, Darren, on the Penguins and Ron Hextall, you've lost in the first round 4 straight years here with Sidney, Gino, and Letang. And that Fenway Sports Group manages the Boston Red Sox and Liverpool FC. Like, talk about pressure markets. So needless to say, some of that was going to come
and not afraid, as you look at those other sports, Matt, to do something dramatic.
Yeah.
And we're not just talking about firing front office people like senior execs or the general manager. We're talking about taking a big bite out of that roster by moving one of the beloved or doing something significant.
Well, and this story is so delicious because, as we all know, Brian Burke has no love for the Canucks and Aquilini. I'm not sure Jim Rutherford has great love for David Morehouse and the Penguins. So you have a lot of Sabres that have crossed there in the past and continue to. So we'll watch this story with interest going into the summer. Philip Hronek, Dregs. Yeah. We were absolutely gobsmacked, caught completely off guard. What can you tell us about how that deal came to be?
I would put myself in that camp of being caught off guard, to be fair. I guess it makes sense to me given where the Vancouver Canucks are trying to get to. Again, they've been pretty transparent until recently, that this was going to be a retool. It wasn't going to be anything more than that. So, if you've got issues with your defense, and that has been a problem in Vancouver for an extended period of time, and you feel like there's a player that's going to make you better when healthy for, a length of time, then I can appreciate why they paid the assets to get that, even though there was quite a bit of backlash, as you guys know, in that market. I think it's coming to grips or trying to understand exactly where this team is and where they're headed. But the addition of Hronek is the very reason why I never bought into any of the speculation around Thatcher Demko. And it didn't matter to me who was rolling out the rumor of the day on this guy. It didn't make sense because you need at least 2, maybe 3 high-quality defense. You need a good goaltender, and we can already see what they've got in the younger pieces up front. So I was a bit blindsided that it happened the way it happened, but I'm not surprised based on the direction I know the team is trying to go.
I think it's understandable that the Canucks, or not, maybe it's not understandable. I see why they might think that they can get competitive next year with the Western Conference being the way it is. Yeah. Do you suspect that balance of power will swing in the summer? Do you think the Western Conference can reload a little bit, because the Eastern Conference seems to be the tougher of the two?
Yeah, I mean, to a point, Blake, I think that's fair. But then I look at, what I consider to be the top contenders in the Western Conference. I mean, the one that I'd be scratching my head over is the Winnipeg Jets, to be fair. There is the potential for a fair bit of upheaval in this offseason. Let's see how it goes with Pierre-Luc Dubois, speculation around Scheifele, and then down the road you have to look at Connor Hellebuck, and on it goes. But, I mean, we're a long way from the playoffs, and a deep playoff march by the Jets might change that. I look at the core of the Colorado Avalanche, and I see some real good pieces there that aren't going to change, and that isn't going to go anywhere. And if Gabe Landeskog is healthy, that makes them that much stronger. What's LA going to look like? The Vegas Golden Knights, I mean, there's always the changing of the deck chairs with the Vegas Golden Knights. So I don't know that there's any one team. Well, now that I say that, I guess we should talk about another Canadian team, and that's the Calgary Flames. There could be considerable change there. As we've noted, I mean, we know that Brad Treliving doesn't have a contract extension. Does he want one? I don't know. The only guy with an extension in Calgary is the head coach, Darryl Sutter, which he ended up getting from the owner, and the rest of the coaching staff are on lifelines here as you're late into the second half of this season, and it hasn't worked for the Calgary Flames, and they're outside of the playoff picture. So, how significant can they change things with who knows, maybe a different leadership group and whatnot in Calgary. So there's some compelling storylines.
It should be noted too that even this year, the entrance into the playoffs is maybe even going to be a tad higher in the West. It's just there's no cream of the crop. All the cream of the crop is in the East, but actually getting into the playoffs is no more easy in the West than it is in the East.
No, that's fair, and I can tell you from now talking to Eastern Conference executives and coaches, for that matter, who are getting through the dog days here of the regular season, especially those who have a playoff spot locked down, and they're hoping for the same thing. They don't look at the West as being as daunting. There isn't that powerhouse team coming out of the West, but they're formidable, and they're hoping that they kick the crap out of each other in the later stages of the regular season and then through 3 rounds of the playoffs before they meet in the Stanley Cup final. I can tell you that's what the Eastern Conference teams are hoping for when they look at some of the parity storylines in the West.
Darren, hate to double back, but a lot of fans and listeners were asking me, why did Detroit give up on Filip Hronek? Why did they view him as expendable for only draft picks?
Yeah, I don't know that. That's a good question. Other than maybe you can peddle those picks into something else as you get to the draft. I mean, they move out Tyler Bertuzzi. Again, that wasn't a surprise to many, given where they were at that point in the Eastern Conference standings. But I don't think that there's any deep, dark backstory to that deal other than doing whatever Steve Yzerman could do to kind of restock the cupboard.
And we've heard our friend Mr. Dollywall say they're going to be interested in Gavrikov. They're going to be interested in Barbashev in the offseason and free agency.
Barbanov? Is that? Oh, no, yeah. Not
Barbashev.
Or Barabanov. I saw that segment with Donnie and Rick where he just could not spit out Barabanov. It was like Barbanov. Gavrikov and Barbanov.
He combined them both.
He did.
I believe there might be one of those daily, actually. Karen.
It's like the Milstein stable coming in.
Well, this is what I was going to ask. We're sitting here talking about free the skate or stick and rink. I mean, any chance they'll be the Vancouver Milsteins next year?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, those are good players, though, right?
They are.
So, why wouldn't you express some interest?
Mm-hmm.
I guess the one thing that's worth noting is, and this is a credit to Patrick Allvin and a credit to Milstein for being true to his word. The Pittsburgh Penguins with Jimmy Rutherford and with Patrick Allvin, as we know, were one of the first teams in on Kuzmenko. And Patrick Allvin stayed in constant communication with Milstein. And that's why Kuzmenko ended up landing in Vancouver, because there was the persistent interest and there was constant communication. So if his experience ends up being a positive one, he's gone through some growing pains with Rick Tocchet. But if it's a positive one, why wouldn't you share that, with the likes of some of these pending unrestricted free agents? So anything is possible with Dan Milstein.
Marvelous stuff, Darren. Thank you for this. Appreciate the insight, and we'll catch up next Wednesday.
All right, guys. Be well.